Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Awakening with Kelvin Phiri podcast. In our last episode, we discussed corruption, the enemy of development, exploring how corruption undermines progress across Africa. Today, we continue this conversation by diving into a related but often overlooked issue: conflicts of interest. We'll be discussing whether there are laws in Africa that address this issue, how conflicts of interest manifest across the continent, and why tackling this problem is crucial for our development and governance. We often hear about corruption, but conflicts of interest are just as damaging, silently eroding trust and fairness in our institutions. Stay with us as we uncover the hidden dangers of conflicts of interest and explore what can be done to address them effectively. What is a conflict of interest? Before we dive into the specifics of African laws, let's first define what we mean by a conflict of interest. A conflict of interest occurs when a person in a position of authority or trust, such as a government official, corporate executive, or public servant, has competing personal or financial interests that could potentially interfere with their ability to make impartial decisions. These conflicts can arise in many forms. It could be a public servant who owns shares in a company that stands to benefit from a government contract they are awarding. It could be a lawmaker tasked with creating policies that affect an industry in which they have a significant personal investment. Even at a local level, a municipal official who grants a building permit to a family member without disclosing their relationship could be seen as acting in a conflict of interest. The issue with conflicts of interest is that they may not always involve direct corruption or illegal activities. However, they create a situation where the integrity of decision-making is compromised. Even the perception of a conflict of interest can damage public trust in institutions, as it suggests that decisions may be driven by personal gain rather than the public good. The conflict of interest in Africa's current landscape. Now let's shift our focus to Africa as a whole. Across the continent, the issue of conflicts of interest is prevalent in both the public and private sectors. We've seen cases in multiple African countries where government officials or politicians have been implicated in scandals where their personal interests conflict with their official duties. This raises a critical question: are there laws in African countries that address this vice? The answer is yes, but with some variation. Many African nations have enacted laws and regulations that broadly address conflicts of interest. For instance, countries like Kenya, South Africa, and Nigeria have legal frameworks that require public officers to avoid situations where their personal interests might conflict with their official duties. Additionally, various codes of ethics across the continent require public officials to disclose any potential conflicts and refrain from decisions where a conflict exists. However, the effectiveness of these laws varies widely. While some countries have robust frameworks and institutions to enforce these regulations, others struggle with enforcement due to lack of resources, political will, or institutional capacity. In several high-profile cases across Africa, conflicts of interest have been evident, yet the outcomes often fell short of holding individuals fully accountable. This inconsistency in enforcement not only allows conflicts of interest to persist, but also sends a message that such behavior may be tolerated. Why should we be concerned about conflicts of interest? The answer is simple: they undermine the integrity of our institutions and the fairness of our governance processes. When public officials prioritize their personal gain over the public good, it leads to poor decision-making that can have far-reaching consequences for development. For example, if a government official in any African country is involved in awarding a contract and has a personal stake in one of the bidding companies, they might influence the process to favor their own interests. This not only leads to corruption but also to substandard public projects. Roads may be built poorly, schools may lack necessary resources, and healthcare facilities may not meet the needs of the population. Furthermore, when conflicts of interest become normalized, they create an environment where merit and fairness are overshadowed by favoritism and nepotism. Imagine a scenario where job promotions in a government office are not based on performance or qualifications but on familial connections or personal friendships. This undermines morale, discourages talent, and fosters a culture of mediocrity and inefficiency. Conflicts of interest also have a broader economic impact. They discourage both domestic and foreign investment by creating an unpredictable business environment. When companies believe that they have to compete not on a level playing field, but against entrenched personal interests, they are less likely to invest, expand, or innovate. This stifles economic growth and limits job creation, affecting the entire continent's prosperity. Moreover, conflicts of interest erode public trust. When citizens believe that decisions are being made based on personal gain rather than public interest, they lose faith in their leaders and institutions. This can lead to a disengaged and disillusioned populace, which weakens democracy and hinders development. In a society where the perception is that it's not what you know, but who you know, people are less likely to believe in or participate in civic processes like voting or community organizing. So what can be done to better manage conflicts of interest across Africa? The first step is to strengthen existing legal frameworks. While many countries have laid down the foundation through anti-corruption laws and codes of ethics, there is a need for more specific and enforceable laws that clearly define what constitutes a conflict of interest and outline strict penalties for violations. For example, African countries could benefit from clearer regulations requiring public officials to declare all potential conflicts of interest up front and mandating regular updates as circumstances change. This could be enforced through a centralized database accessible to the public, ensuring transparency and accountability. Second, there needs to be a greater emphasis on transparency and accountability. Public officials should be required to regularly disclose their financial interests and any potential conflicts. These disclosures should be made available to the public to ensure that there is no room for unethical behavior. A proactive approach to transparency would also involve public audits and independent reviews of these disclosures to ensure accuracy and honesty. Third, we need robust enforcement mechanisms. This means empowering anti-corruption agencies and other regulatory bodies across Africa with the resources and authority they need to investigate and prosecute cases of conflict of interest. Without enforcement, even the best laws are meaningless. The judiciary, too, must be independent and well-resourced to handle such cases effectively, ensuring that justice is both done and seen to be done. Furthermore, whistleblower protection is crucial. Many individuals may be aware of conflicts of interest but fear retaliation if they speak out. Strengthening laws and protections for whistleblowers can encourage more people to come forward with information about unethical behavior without fear of retribution. But finally, public awareness and education are key. Citizens across Africa must understand what conflicts of interest are and why they matter. This knowledge empowers people to hold their leaders accountable and demand better governance. Civic education programs, community discussions, and the role of media in highlighting cases of conflict of interest can help create a culture of zero tolerance for unethical practices. There is also a role for civil society organizations in monitoring and advocating against conflicts of interest. By providing oversight and raising awareness, these organizations can help ensure that public officials are held accountable to their duties and the public good. And leadership plays a pivotal role in addressing conflicts of interest. When leaders set a high standard for ethical behavior and transparency, it sends a strong message throughout the organization or government that integrity matters. Conversely, when leaders themselves are embroiled in conflicts of interest or turn a blind eye to unethical behavior, it undermines any efforts to foster a culture of accountability. This is why ethical leadership is so critical. Leaders need to lead by example, not just through words but through actions. This means declaring their interests openly, recusing themselves from decisions where they have a personal stake, and supporting policies and practices that promote transparency and fairness. Cultural change is also important. In many African societies, there may be a tendency to overlook or even accept certain types of conflicts of interest as just the way things are. To change this mindset, there needs to be a concerted effort to educate and inform citizens about the dangers of conflicts of interest and why they should care. This cultural shift starts with each of us, recognizing that integrity and fairness are not just ideals but practical necessities for a functioning, prosperous society. Conflicts of interest may seem like a technical or minor issue, but they have a profound impact on the quality of governance and development across Africa. By addressing this challenge head-on, we can help ensure that decisions are made in the best interest of the public and that our leaders are held to the highest standards of integrity. In our quest for a better Africa, we must remember that the fight against